Adam Trehearne, who will be here shortly, collects pistols and a few long arms in wheel-lock, proto-flintlock, and early flintlock to 1700. And Philip Cabot collects U.S. Marshals, flintlock to automatic, and also enemy and allied army weapons from all of our wars. And Colin MacBride collects nothing but Colts. Odd how a Scot who's only been in this country 20 years should be interested in so distinctively American a type. "And I collect anything I can sell at a profit, from Chinese matlocks to Tommy guns," Karen Lawrence interjected, coming into the room with Doc Gresham. Pierre grinned. "Karen is practically a unique specimen herself, the only general antique dealer I've ever seen who doesn't hate the sight of a gun collector." "That's only because I'm crazy enough to want to marry one," the girl dealer replied. "Of all the miserly, unscrupulous, grasping characters—" She expressed a doubt that the average gun collector would pay more than 10 cents to see his lord and savior riding to hounds on a Bren carrier. "They don't give a hoot whose grandfather owned what, and if anything's battered up a little, they don't think it looks quaint. They think it looks lousy. And they've never heard of inflation. They think arms ought still to sell for the sort of prices they brought at the old Mark Field sale back in 1911. "What are you looking at?" Dot asked Rand, then glanced at the musket in Pierre's hands. "Oh, Priscilla!" Karen laughed. "Dot not only knows everything in the collection, she knows it by name. Dot, show Colonel Rand Hester Prynne." "Hester coming up," Gresham's daughter said, catching another musket out of the same rack from which Pierre had gotten the matchlock, and passing it over to Rand. He grasped the heavy piece, approving of the easy, instinctive way in which the girl had handled it. "Look on the barrel," she told him. "On top, right at the breech." The gun was a flintlock, or rather a doglock. Sure enough, stamped on the breech was the big A of the Company of Workmen Armorers of London, the 17th Century Gunmakers' Guild. "That's right," he nodded. "That's Hester Prynne, all right, the first American girl to make her letter." There were footsteps in the hall outside, and male voices. Adam and Colin, Pierre recognized them before they entered. Both men were past 50. Colin MacBride was a 6-foot black Highlander, black eyes, black hair, and a black weeping willow mustache from under which a stubby pipe jutted. Except when he emptied it of ashes and refilled it, it was a permanent fixture of his weather-beaten face. Trehearne was somewhat shorter and fair. His sandy mustache, beginning to turn gray at the edges, was clipped to micrometric exactness. They shook hands with Rand, who set Hester back in her place. Trehearne took the matchlock out of Pierre's hand and looked at it wistfully. "Some chaps have all the luck," he commented. "What do you think of it, Mr. Rand?" Pierre, who had made the introductions, had respected the detective's present civilian status. "Or don't you collect long arms?" "I don't collect them, but I'm interested in anything that'll shoot. That's a good one. Those things are scarce, too." "Yes, you'll find 100 wheel locks for every matchlock, and yet there must have been 100 matchlocks for every wheel lock." "Matchlocks were cheap, and wheel locks were expensive," MacBride suggested. He spoke with the faintest trace of Highland accent. "Naturally, they got better care." "It would take a Scot to think of that," Karen said. "Now, you take a Scot who collects guns, and you have something." "That's only part of it," Rand said. "I believe that by the last quarter of the 17th century, most of the matchlocks that were lying around had been scrapped and the barrels used in making flintlocks. Hester Prynne, over there, could easily have started her career as a matchlock. And then a great many matchlocks went into the West African slave and ivory trade, and were promptly ruined by the natives." "Yes, and I seem to recall having seen Spanish and French miguelet muskets that looked as though they had been altered directly from matchlock, retaining the original stock and even the original lock plate," Trehearne added. "So have I, come to think of it." Rand stole a glance at his wristwatch. It was 9:05. He was wishing Stephen Gresham would put in an appearance. MacBride and Trehearne joined Pierre and the girls in showing him Gresham's collection. Evidently, they all knew it almost as well as their own. After a while, Irene Gresham ushered in Philip Cabot. He, too, was past middle age, with prematurely white hair and a thin, scholarly face. According to Hollywood typecasting, he might have been a professor, or a judge, or a Boston Brahmin. but never a stockbroker. Irene Gresham wanted to know what everybody wanted to drink. Rand wanted bourbon and plain water. McBride voted for Jamaican rum. Trehearne and Cabot favored brandy and soda, and Pierre and the girls wanted Bacardi and Coca-Cola. "And Stephen will want rye and soda when he gets here," Irene said. "Come on, girls, let's rustle up the drinks." Before they returned, Stephen Gresham came in, lighting a cigar. It was just 9:22. "Well, I see everybody's here," he said. "No, where's Karen?" Pierre told him. A few minutes later, the women returned, carrying the bottles and glasses. When the flurry of drink mixing had subsided, they all sat down. "Let's get the business over first," Gresham suggested. "I suppose you've gone over the collection already, Jeff?" "Yes, and first of all, I want to know something. When was the last that any of you saw it?" Gresham and Pierre had been in Fleming's gunroom just 2 days before the fatal accident. "And can you tell me if the big Whitneyville Colt was still there then?" Rand asked. "Or the Rappahannock Forge, or the Collier flintlock, or the Hall?" "Why, of course." "My God, aren't they there now?" Gresham demanded. Rand shook his head. "And if Fleming still had them 2 days before he was killed, then somebody's been weeding out the collection since. Doing it very cleverly, too," he added. "You know how that stuff's arranged, and how conspicuous a missing pistol would be. Well, when I was going over the collection, I found about 24 pieces of the most utter trash. Things Lane Fleming wouldn't have allowed in the house, all hanging where some really good item ought to have been." He took a paper from his pocket and read off a list of the dubious items, interpolating comments on the condition, and a list of the real rarities which Gresham had mentioned the day before, which were now missing. "All that good stuff was there the last time I saw the collection," Gresham said. "What do you say, Pierre?" "I had the Hall pistol in my hands," Pierre said, "and I remember looking at the Rappahannock Forge." Trehearne broke in to ask how many English doglocks there were, and if the Snap-Haunce Highlander and the big all-steel wheel lock were still there. At the same time, Cabot was inquiring about the Springfield 1818 and the Virginia manufactory pistols. "I'll have a complete itemized list in a few days," Rand said. "In the meantime, I'd like a couple of you to look at the collection and help me decide what's missing. I'm going to try to catch the thief and then get at the fence through them." "Think Rivers might have gotten the pistols?" Gresham asked. "He's the crookedest dealer I know of." "He's the crookedest dealer anybody knows of," Rand amended. "The only thing, he's a little too anxious to buy the collection for somebody who's just skimmed off the cream." $10,000 isn't much in the way of anxiety," Cabot said. "I'd call that a nominal bid to avoid suspicion. The dope's changed a little on that." Rand brought him up to date. "Rivers' offer is now $25,000. There was a stunned hush, followed by a gust of exclamations. "Good Lord!" The Scots accent fairly curdled on Colin McBride's tongue. "We cannot go over that!" "I'm afraid not. 20 would be about our limit," Gresham agreed. "And with the best items gone—" He shrugged. Pierre and Karen were looking at each other in blank misery. Their dream of establishing themselves in the arms business had blown up in their faces. "Oh, he's talking through his hat," Cabot declared. "He just hopes we'll lose interest, and then he'll buy what's left of the collection for a song." "Maybe he knows the collection's been robbed," Trehearne suggested. "That would let him out later. He'd accuse you or the Fleming estate of holding out the best pieces, and then offer to take what's left for about $5,000. "Well, that would be presuming that he knows the collection has been robbed," Cabot pointed out. "And the only way he'd know that would be if he himself had bought the stolen pistols." "Well, does anybody need a chaser to swallow that?" Trehearne countered. "I'm bloody sure I don't." Karen Lawrence shook her head. "No, he'd pay $25,000 for the collection, just as it stands, to keep Pierre and me out of the arms business. This end of the state couldn't support another arms dealer, and with the reputation he's made for himself, he'd be the one to go under." She stubbed out her cigarette and finished her drink. "If you don't mind, Pierre, I think I'll go home." "I'm not feeling very festive myself, right now." The ex-Marine rose and held out his hand to Rand. "Don't get the idea, Jeff, that anybody here holds this against you. You have your client's interest to look out for." "Well, if this be treason, make the most of it," Rand said.